So you would think that the Pentagon press corps, of all press corps, would be front and center across the board on wanting to give credit to the president for forging this kind of peace, and instead what they want to talk about is a policy about them, which simply says maybe the policy should look like the White House or other military installations where you have to wear a badge that identifies that you're press, or you can't just roam anywhere you want. It used to be, Mr. President, the press could go anywhere, pretty much anywhere in the Pentagon.
You would think that having a mainstream media man at the head of the Pentagon would mean that we'd have some degree of understanding between the very, very big Republican government of the Trump administration and the mainstream media. But no, the Trump administration wants this government to be even bigger than it already is. And I know what you're thinking. Republicans are the party of small government. Democrats like bigger government. Sure, traditionally, yes. But if we don't know by now that politicians can say one thing and do another, then I don't know what to tell you. The Republican branding is still small government because that is what their voters still align with. They see smaller government as facilitating their own ability to exert more control over their personal lives. In other words, smaller government means to them more freedom. Also to them, bigger government feels authoritarian, as if the government is reaching into their personal lives. They like the idea of states having more rights than the federal government because states feel closer to them, more local, more specific. They're more likely to be in agreement with people within their own state than they are with people across the country, and that is a very reasonable thing for them to believe. Conversely, Democrats and leftists tend to think the opposite. Again, traditionally, bigger government is believed to mean not necessarily authoritarianism to them, at least not in the way that people on the left tend to advocate for bigger government. They want things that would benefit the majority of citizens to be codified into law at the national level so that the rising tide can raise all of our boats. In that sense, bigger government means things like better infrastructure, widespread climate consciousness, a national health care initiative, federal funding for public school systems, etc. Ultimately, the average citizen has the freedom to exist within a country where they don't have to worry about things like their children's education or their health care or just getting to and from work. When these basic institutions are protected, people have the freedom to exist without fear of any major destabilizations to these institutions. The ideal is likely somewhere in the middle of these two options, which is sort of what we had for a long time. It was never perfect, but it was a hell of a lot better than what we've got under this current administration. What we've seen in these few months under the Trump administration is the government consolidating as much power as possible at the very top. Trump is in many ways the most powerful president we have ever had in the literal sense, in that there is no one to stop him from enacting his worst impulses. The Supreme Court is completely defunct and corrupt. Both houses of Congress have fallen to Republican control, and Trump has sycophants and lackeys in extremely high positions elsewhere in government, like the Pentagon, like the DOJ. So while they've been actively consolidating power at the top, they have canceled or dismantled countless government programs in the name of small government, giving these rights back to the states where they belong, or that's what they say. Really, they're just slashing the budgets, doing who knows what with all of the tax dollars that they're still taking in from us, and loading up states with incredible financial burdens that they will not be able to carry. Ultimately, everyone will suffer if they are not already. So that brings me to Pete Hegseth and the Pentagon. According to a new policy from the Department of Defense, U.S. news organizations are supposed to, quote, vow not to obtain unauthorized files, unquote, and then report on them. They're only supposed to report on official insights that they get directly from the government. And in a very encouraging turn, several major news organizations are pushing back. From The Guardian, several leading news organizations with access to Pentagon briefings have formally said they will not agree to a new Defense Department policy that requires them to pledge they will not obtain unauthorized material and restricts access to certain areas unless accompanied by an official. On Monday, The Washington Post joined the New York Times, CNN, The Atlantic, The Guardian, Reuters, the Associated Press, NPR, HuffPost, and trade publication Breaking Defense in saying it would not sign on to the agreement. Even the right-leaning Newsmax is refusing to sign on to this limitation on their ability to report the news.
This is not just a war on leaks. every administration
carries that out to one level or another.
More on this, at least from my perspective, is making the Pentagon as difficult to cover as possible. And, you know, the next step is to ban reporters entirely from the Pentagon.
The obvious objection to signing on to something like this is that it would essentially be the creation of state-run news. It's a clear violation of freedom of the press, but we all know that Trump just likes to take away freedoms from people these days, which he has literally bragged about doing in the very, very recent past. But preventing news outlets from obtaining supplemental information on what comes out of the government is not allowing journalists to be journalists. According to the policy, however, if an organization does not sign the pledge, they're going to lose their press credentials. And it seems as though they're following through with that threat. Hegseth responded on social media to statements from The Atlantic, The Post, and The Times by posting a single emoji of a hand waving goodbye. Later, the defense secretary, a former Fox Weekend anchor, posted a list on X of what he called press credentialing for dummies. Press no longer roams free. Press must wear visible badge. Credentialed press no longer permitted to solicit criminal acts. He also reposted a cartoon that depicted The Atlantic as a crying baby. Pete Hegseth is probably still salty about The Atlantic outing him for discussing military operations in a Signal chat. But what is the official response from the Pentagon? Oh, just that all of these news outlets are overreacting as usual. They're being so dramatic. Pentagon spokesperson Sean Parnell told the Washington Post that media outlets had decided to move the goalpost, saying that the policy doesn't require reporters to agree, but just acknowledge they understand it. Parnell said that request had caused reporters to have a full-blown meltdown, crying victim online. He added, "We stand by our policy because it's what's best for our troops and the national security of this country." Let's be very clear, though. The biggest threat to the American people right now is currently coming from our own government, from our own military. We just saw the president and the defense secretary say that they were going to use American cities as training grounds for the military. Like, what exactly are they trying to convince us is the real threat here? And why would a lockdown and functionally debilitated press suddenly be a national security initiative unless they're trying to hide something from the American people? Isn't this supposed to be the most transparent president and the most transparent administration this country has ever seen? Isn't that why so many MAGA people voted for Trump 3 separate times within 10 years? Because they wanted to drain the swamp and because they didn't want to be lied to anymore? The writing has been on the wall for over 10 years now, when Trump started calling mainstream media outlets fake news before he ever became president. And look, I'm not going to sit here and defend outlets like CNN or whoever, but I will say that there are good people working at those networks, people who care about the job that they do and the service that they provide to the American people. Those networks are also held to a very high standard when it comes to reporting factual information. Fox News, for example, does not report factual information. That's why they've lost so many lawsuits and had to pay so many millions or billions of dollars in fines pertaining to their non-factual reporting. But you may not like their analysis of information. You may not like how they choose to frame certain stories. You may not like the stories that they choose to report on or which ones they choose not to report on. But they do have the right to report it as long as the facts themselves are being reported accurately. By the way, one network that had no problem accepting the new policy from the DoD was OAN, One America News, with Matt Gaetz, who I actually forgot is an anchor over there, saying that he is, quote, happy to follow these reasonable conditions. All right, that's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks.